right, Silicon Valley, let's talk about investing in climate tech. You've been investing in climate tech for a while. How did you get started? Why did it appeal to you? And then maybe share some of the lessons from Climate 1.0 for those of people that don't know it.
How much time do we have?
Yeah, plenty of time.
So I got into investing in climate in 2006, and I used to be in Boston at that time. And as a generalist investor, your job is to follow smart people. And at that time, at the MIT campus, about half the faculty was starting to work on climate and climate-related things. There was this huge movement there, and a lot of the smart students wanted to go start companies in that area. So, we decided we should follow them and start investing in the area. We put together a business plan. There was a lot of uncertainty. If you think about the idea that, building climate-oriented companies back then, there were no entrepreneurs that knew how to do this. There really weren't policies that had been created that created market certainty. And certainly, we knew nothing about it. And so it was sort of an interesting attempt at a new sector. And we learned a lot through that. And obviously, around 2012, 2013, a lot of that crumbled for many of us. Many firms that invested in that area were not very successful. There were very few companies that actually worked. And some that did have been very profound, as we know, like Tesla. But a lot of learnings there. I can go into details when you want. I don't want to keep into a long monologue.
Was it just too early in terms of, or was it the expertise not built up?
No, I think the first thing is you need certain markets. Like market certainty is a big thing when you're going to go build a business. And the way the policies got written didn't create a certain market certainty for us. So I'll give you an example. We funded some companies that were working on cellulosic ethanol. If you remember, the whole idea was start blending ethanol made from cellulosic into gasoline. And there was this whole renewable fuel standard that was created. And the penalty for not complying for oil companies was 25 cents a gallon. What did they do? They just passed that to the consumer and took the penalty. So wherever the policy design was poor, markets never got created. In solar, you had the investment tax credit. So you actually could see the infrastructure getting built. And look where we are with solar. So there was big learnings on are you going to end up, is the ecosystem going to let you, and as policymakers, are you going to develop policies that create market certainty? That was the first big thing. Mm-hmm. The second thing was, these businesses are so complex, and the kinds of founders and entrepreneurs that were building these companies, a lot of them were academics who, frankly, weren't very commercial in their thinking. And were like, oh, we'll do the science innovation, we'll build the first pilot plant, we'll build a commercial plant, and we're going to go scale to billions of gallons or billions of gigawatts, whatever your metric of energy or power was. And that's just not how you build businesses. So I think that was the other thing, which was just the cadence with which these companies got built was just not right. And then, when you start compounding technology risk, market risk, together with the complexity of these things, then things take longer. Then the whole appetite for funding those things went away. And so, I have serious PTSD from doing that. In fact, getting back into it now, the biggest detractor in the firm we have to get over is actually me, because I was the one who dealt with all the failures of doing it the first time around.
So are we at a legitimate 2.0? What is different now, and why is the landscape better?
Yeah, I think there's a few things happening that I'm very encouraged by. First is the entrepreneurs that are getting in to build the companies this time around are amazing, right? So Peter Reinhardt, who's doing Charm. You look at, was it Matt Rogers who did Nest? You look at the Stripe folks with Stripe Climate and how they're catalyzing the market. They're just incredible people getting in. And so that's one thing I really like. And they're true sort of systems engineers. They're good systems thinkers, as opposed to they were academics. So that gives me hope. Mm-hmm. I think the other thing is a lot of the innovation in the first time around was around changing the supply infrastructure. And this time around, the perspectives from the demand and customer orientation. So there's a lot of pressure on corporations to be, controversial word, but ESG compliant. And that's forcing them to think about.
I don't know how we let that get controversial.
Yeah, well, it's got its pros and cons. I would say I think when you think about what needs to happen there, there's demand, and you can actually ride that demand to create these new technologies. And the other thing, if you think about what Tesla really did, it essentially turned transportation into an app on the grid because it mobilized the entire auto industry to go towards electrification. That creates new demand. So all of a sudden you have new demand, and then you can actually bring in new solutions for supplies. You can start to work on storage and greener forms of power and infrastructure rollout. So I think there are these interesting trends that create markets, and there's a lot of learnings from the last time. So I am very optimistic, and obviously, given all the climate-related episodes that have happened since then, the conviction in the general public is higher that this is a thing, and this wasn't just a political viewpoint. And so I think collectively, I feel like the world's moving towards maybe now's the time to do something about it.
maybe finally.
So we got to try, right? I mean, I think
right.
everybody here is obviously a believer, but I do think conditions are better this time around than in '06.
So what do you look for? There's obviously, we've covered a ton of different technologies, platforms, approaches. What do you look for when making an investment now?
The founder. I think as I go back to it, company building is a big thing for me, and I think that's important. I think the second thing is the mindset of building these types of companies has to be different from a lot of what we do in Silicon Valley. So the thing in software is you build a $100 million business selling developer tools. You're a market leader, and everybody's throwing money at you, and you can go public and do whatever you want. You sell $100 million of solar power, nobody cares. Why? Because the markets are so large that your impact on the industry actually is insignificant at that scale. So how do you really think about radical collaboration with the ecosystem so that you can actually make a difference at scale? Like if you truly are a mission-driven founder in this space, even if you created a solution to some problem around energy generation, energy efficiency, you pick a problem. Unless you did it at scale, you're not going to make a difference. You'll just build another business that was a relatively low multiple, interesting outcome, but didn't change the world, and frankly, is not going to be, from an economic standpoint, that successful either. So scale, how do you really defy physics and scale in a way that startups just aren't meant to? That has a lot to do with how do you sort of surround yourself with the ecosystems and build. So that mindset is really important.
I think that the Valley understands the software model very, very well, and it works really well. A lot of these climate solutions are hardware solutions, and they are harder to scale just by definition. Do you think investors have an appetite for the longer time frames that hardware takes?
Yeah, I mean, we have a thesis in our firm around just global resilience in general. I think climate's a part of it, food. When you think about defense, like in this world where politics is starting to trump business in certain parts of the economy, how are these supply chains going to reconfigure? And I think that's where your traditional venture model actually breaks. I've written about this. You can't think on 10-year horizons. It's too short. We have a whole effort in the firm around transforming the healthcare system, and I'm 10 years into it. We have 150 companies we're building, and I know it's going to take another 20 years before we really make a difference in the U.S. healthcare system alone. And so climate's an even more complex problem, and obviously, unless you solve it globally, it doesn't work because we all share the same atmosphere. So in some ways, the scope is even far, far greater. And so I think in that regard, we do have to think about different horizons. We do have to think about not only commercializing, but also what does it take to roll out at scale, which immediately becomes engaging different sovereigns. So there's different pools of capital that have to collaborate and come together is complex. So I'm hoping there's a groundswell now to start thinking that way as we build this next generation of companies.
Are there any particular technologies or approaches that you're a big fan of, that you're very hopeful for?
I haven't thought that way, to be honest, because I think it's one of those where there's no silver bullet. You study fusion because of the whole discovery that was made, and you realize, boy, it's going to take another 40 years. We went down and really did a deep dive into that. You study hydrogen, you say, There are some interesting use cases, and it really should be used. So to me, it's always going to be about portfolio construction, and this dogmatic view that this is right, this is wrong is just not helpful, because there are applications and use cases that are all big enough segments that you can build companies with a lot of these different technologies. And so I'm a fan of, like, as I think about, well, what kind of a portfolio do I want to see in our firm 10 years from now? I'd like to see that we've actually, yet again, I failed with this in 2006, created a portfolio and taken a shot in all the different directions, because I do believe that's the right way to approach it.
You want to place all the bets.
You have to attempt all the technologies. Yeah, I don't call them bets.
Fair. That's why you're an investor and I'm a journalist. So in terms of the role of government, obviously the IRA has come up a lot. Clarence is going to come and talk to us about that after we're done with our talk. Does that change the landscape for you as an investor at all?
Yeah, look, I think in a lot of these, so if you go from mainstream what the Valley was doing in software, which was, in the 1996 Telecommunications Deregulation Act, everything is open market, to when you start working on healthcare or climate or food, those are regulated markets. So if you're really going to change those systems, you have no choice but to think about innovating at the intersection of technology, policy, and capital. That's the only way it works. And so I think this idea that the government's going to solve it or the private sector is going to solve it, I don't believe that. I actually think the radical collaboration is going to solve it. And everybody has to come together. And again, in climate, this is not a problem we start solving for the United States. We're solving for planet Earth. And so you really have to have a solution for how will the emerging economies embrace whatever you do as well. Because there's a lot of anxiety there that we're asking them to not raise their quality of life with the means that got us there, and because now we somehow messed up the world. And I think just how do you build that trust so that the entire, all the key countries at least can move in the sort of similar direction is a complicated problem. The only way it's going to work if we build successful businesses. Fear doesn't work. Greed works, in society. So I'm a big believer that capitalism is the answer in the end to climate change.
And it's funny, we were just talking about that outside, that this is something government would like to do, but it's going to take private capital to actually drive this forward.
It has to be both. That's the only way it works.
I'll open it up and see if there's any questions. Raise your hand if you, oh, there's one.
Well, since you said it at the end, that capitalism is the answer, I guess I'll just ask, what do you think?
I have to say that, I'm a capitalist.
I know. And I'm just I want to give you a chance to qualify it. What do you think about pricing and externalities, though, like carbon, and the role that that's going to play in our capitalist system going forward?
Yeah. George Schultz and I used to talk a lot about this because I had started this policy nonprofit with Tom Steyer, and he was always the gas tax. That's the answer. And I think, pricing, you kind of have to price externality. How you do this is very complex. I mean, if you look at all the carbon credit markets, for example, it's just, does it work, does it not? The nonprofits that actually drive the accreditation they're like, how precise are they? Problem is, if we're going to do this, we need better systems to be able to do it. But I'm a fan of pricing externalities, because otherwise we're never going to get there. The sentiment of shareholders driving big companies is not going to be enough of a leverage to really open up the market enough.
Hemant, thanks so much for coming in. This was a great conversation.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Yep.